It's getting close to the end of the day, so everybody stand up. Oh, they said they did this to you earlier. I'm sorry. Stand up anyway. So, if you've never used Chocolatey, please sit down. If you've been using Chocolatey for less than a year, sit down. If you've been using Chocolatey for less than 2 years, sit down. Wow, some people have really used the crappy version. Fantastic. So less than 3 years? 4 years? Am I just going to keep going all the way to the beginning? Okay. Awesome. Cool. Nice little exercise there. It gives me a good idea of where everybody's at. All right, so my name is Rob. I created Chocolatey about six and a half years ago, and we've really seen it flourish. And so we have a pretty fantastic community out there, pretty exciting, and yeah, you can read all this. So we're going to get into Chocolatey. So first question I have for y'all is, how many people just came for chocolate? All right, so if you were in the workshop yesterday, some of this will be a little bit of overlap, but we'll get into the demo, and so you'll see all some new stuff then. So just bear with me. All right, so most of us are here because we want to automate Windows, or we're already doing a lot of automation with Windows, and we're just like trying to do more and seeing some of the new stuff that Chocolatey can do. So a lot of times we get the question, you know, when you have something like SCCM or you have some other tool, why Chocolatey, right? And how many people in here, raise your hand, if you install Windows and you don't do anything additional to it, you just use it as it is? Right? Nobody raised their hand, right? So that's where software management comes in. So you spend most of your time configuring Windows and getting software there and getting that software configured, right? And so it's a lot of management. With Windows, I mean, there's no real standard as far as installers go. There's at least 20 installers out there. And if you don't like that, you can make your own, right? Some people do. And then there's other ways. So you can have zips, you can have archive formats for your own internal stuff. You maybe have a different way of doing that, right? And so when it comes to something like Chocolatey, oh, well, not quite there yet. We'll come back to that. So some of the reasons why in the Chocolatey, you already do deploy software, right? And so we changed the names here so you can't see what this was, just in case. It might be mine, might be yours. So if it's an install bat, you typically see that a lot. Some people go that way. Some people go with PowerShell, and that tends to work out pretty nicely. And that actually rolls right into Chocolatey really nicely as well. How many people know what this is? How many people don't want to admit they know what this is right now? So this is SCCM, and so this is another way that people deploy Chocolatey software onto Windows. I don't want to say Chocolatey, too much Chocolatey on the brain today. And you know, it's something that you can do for that as well. Now, the person that said this is actually in the room. But you know, some of the big reasons into why Chocolatey is when you're taking a look at those batch installers and you look at what you can do with Chocolatey with so much less code, right? And so really when you're looking at Chocolatey and you're comparing it to other things, what you'll see with Chocolatey is it is offline, it is secure. It does come default hooked up to a community repository. That is the first thing that most organizations shut off. We hope it's all organizations, but we know better. And it is, has a lot of features, a lot of really rich reporting. Reporting is really important when you're deploying to production and things don't go right. And sometimes with Windows, a lot of times with Windows, something needs a pending reboot, so that's usually the case. But it does go beyond programs and features, so there's a lot of tools out there that will install things, but they always will work with installers. They never work past that, right? So Chocolatey does. So it works with anything that you want to manage, anything you want to be able to install or uninstall, could be configuration files, all of that, right? And it integrates with everything. So then there's some other stuff here. If you were to recreate Chocolatey yourself, it would cost a couple dollars. So what is Chocolatey? Everybody in here pretty much knows what it is. So we can skip right past this. Software management uses PowerShell. These package files are what we call, they're fancy zip files, but really independent deployment artifacts is another way of thinking about it. So I'll go ahead and run that so it'll be going. But back to why, and all those different installer formats that you can use, and the zips and the archives, Chocolatey has a real universal approach to all of that. So you have that one interface, you're able to handle that. And it does a lot with things that you're already using. So non-proprietary, no, I can't talk this afternoon. Non-proprietary technologies like PowerShell. And we've been in this for a while. And when it comes to internal organizational use, so before today, how many people thought the community repository was really the only way you could interact with Chocolatey? Chocolatey.org/packages. Nobody. Fantastic. We're actually doing our job well then. So our training people. So when it comes to the community repository, that represents about 5% of the packages that are out there, maybe less. We don't know, right? Because everything is under the tip of the iceberg. Organizations that are out there, back when 2012, I want to say, 2013, when the community repository had just over 1,000 or 2,000 packages, there was one organization with about twice that many that we knew about, right? And so it's just grown from there. And so when you're in an organization, we always say don't cross the line to the internet. Keep everything inside, right? And so you're embedding those things into the packages, you're pointing to internal resources, you're not reaching out to the internet. So it's a little bit of a different use. So that community use versus internal organizations is a bit different. This is really hard to see, I'm sorry, but there is that community package repository, so coming back to that for just a second. And one of the big reasons that we say organizations should avoid this is it has the distribution rights. So it's a bit of a constraint. For a public repository, you can't actually embed the software into the packages. A lot of times you have to reach out to the internet to download it from the official location, right? And so that keeps it from being fully reliable. And that's not something that an organization ever has to deal with because when you have everything internal, you don't have to worry about that. And then for a lot of organizations, especially in Windows, there's a lot of trust and control issues. So you want to be able to control that entire process so that you can trust in it. Unfortunately, there are ways to take some of the great logic of these over 5,000 packages and bring them internal to your organization. So you can use Internalizer that we have. You can also manually go through the process of doing that internalization. All right, so stepping into some of the features, we'll start by talking about what's the difference between open source and the commercial options that are out there. So when it comes to open source is very much strictly about package management, and that does work well in organizations. You see that used pretty much quite a bit there. And when we talk about Chocolatey for Business, that's much more complete software management. So it's going much more towards that, owning that whole bit of software management, as we'll continue to see over the next year or two. And so much smoother experience out of the box. And it does have much better system integration. We're adding that endpoint management. We'll talk about that a little bit on the roadmap. And also visual interfaces and features that are geared specifically for organizations. Some of these features are you could rebuild in open source. Some of these features would be very difficult to rebuild open source because we're able to hook into places inside of that process that you just can't when you're doing that. So for those that are using, this probably looks like a very familiar screen. And so this is kind of that command line side. I'm sorry, it didn't come through as well on the actual up here. But how many people in here knew we had a GUI? How many people just found out, right? Some people said we named it wrong. We should have called it GUI Chocolatey. I don't know what that's about. But it does on a client. You do get that opportunity to set up configuration. Sometimes that's a little bit better interface to look at when you're looking at the configuration that's there. And also, managing installations of packages as well. And another thing about Chocolatey, when you install something, 9 times out of 10, when you install something into programs and features using a package, you don't need an uninstall script because it already knows how to remove it, right? And we call that the auto uninstaller. We integrate with everything. Pretty much anything that can run a script can direct Chocolatey. So when it comes to Puppet, Chef, and DSC to an extent, but Ansible and SaltStack, there are organizations that are behind those, right? So those organizations actually maintain those providers. We do a lot of tight integration working with them on that to ensure that they stay pretty well. We got Puppet in the room, probably have Chef somewhere in here too. But when it comes to some of these others, doing really well there. But PowerShell DSC, we took over that resource back in April. It was a community-based resource, and we saw it needed quite a bit more attention to bring it to the same level as some of these other providers. So we brought that in, and we're continuing making that better. And I'm sure some people in here would say it's not quite good enough yet, as I smile over there. When it comes to reporting and auditing, so here when you are running a local command, you can actually get a view of what's on the system and what versions are. Right? And so when it comes to that Choco list local only, it gives us a nice view of everything that Chocolatey is managing. And again, that's not just what's in programs and features, that's everything. So any of those zip archives, all of that stuff. We can also add in include programs, and it's going to show us the other things that Chocolatey is not managing. Right? And at the bottom down here, we're seeing one of our first commercial features. That's package audit. And so for a lot of organizations, you'll sometimes deal with auditors that want to know information about a system. And sometimes they want to know, who installed the software? When did it get installed? I'd like to see the history of that. Our package audit does that. So when you are deploying out with Chocolatey, those zips, those installs, all that stuff. So if it's an MSI or something that goes into programs and features, a lot of times you'll get that install date. If you become an event log ninja, you could probably figure out who installed those MSIs. But for everything else, good luck. And so one of the big things when you deploy out invariably to 100 systems as part of your deployments, you're going to run into one or two that might fail. Thank you, Windows. 9 times out of 10, it's a pending reboot. But when you do run into those, and it is that kind of scenario, the blood's boiling, so you're trying to figure out what went wrong. Chocolatey has very deep and detailed logging, and so it's going to be able to tell you a lot of times what you need to do so that you can move forward and get that fixed. So another report that we have out there is our Choco Outdated, and this is a nice comprehensive report. So if we have maintenance windows, or we just want to see how out of date this system is, we're able to run this report, and as you see in the image here, everything is false, and that's just telling us that those things are not pinned. So Chocolatey does support the concept of pinning. So I could install something like Java 6, pin it so it stays on Java 6, and won't upgrade until I remove that pin. So it'll show up here as true. And in commercial editions, we're actually able to give that a reason so that the rest of our team knows pretty significantly why we actually pinned it to that particular version. Package repositories. Show of hands, how many people in here are using Artifactory? How many people are using Nexus? ProGet? A few more, right? How about MyGet? Anybody using MyGet? Awesome. NuGet server / Chocolatey server? NuGet gallery proper? All out there. Okay. Visual Studio, team services, how many people are using that, right? With Chocolatey? Awesome. So what we typically recommend when it comes to all of these different choices that are out there, we recommend the commercial entities, ProGet, Sonatype, Nexus, Artifactory Pro. Those do have those commercial bodies behind them. They are ensuring that those things stay pretty good. And some of them do have a free version that you can get started with. Others, like Artifactory, is a pay-for-play, so that's the first version of that. A lot of things you're going to find in them. HA, some of them have multiple repository types, so you'll be able to not only manage Chocolatey and NuGet type packages, but Docker containers, right? Other things you can put right into these repositories, and that's pretty good features there. So when it comes to creating software deployment packages, how many people have created software packages, Chocolatey packages anyway? Did y'all use the choco new command? How many people do the copy paste and then change it? We see that a lot. Yeah. So if you were to take a package, and in Chocolatey speak, package is an NUPKG file, we call that a new package, and you were to rename it to a zip, you'd be able to unpack it like an archive, and in there you're going to find a new spec, and that's the metadata. A lot of times you're going to see PowerShell, and when it comes to internal packages, very often you're going to see those runtime binaries or those installers are dropped right into that package. Choco New is what we recommend when you create packages. That's going to give you a lot of hints, a lot of help, especially when you're new to creating packages. But we also, you have the ability to create your own packaging templates. We have a blog post out there you can go read that kind of goes through that. It's a little tiny, but we're actually going to see that in the demo, so we'll come back to that. And then we have our package builder. And package builder is another commercial feature. And this really allows us to speed up that process of creating packages. And so if I was to manually create a package, it takes somewhere between 5 minutes to 10 minutes or an hour, right? If I knew everything I needed to know. When it comes to Package Builder can go through an archive of installers in every 5 seconds. We get a fully ready to go software deployment, right? Very, very quickly. And one of the nice things that it can do there is it's going to range everything. It's going to figure out everything that it can. If there are things that it can't figure out, we'll get a to-do list. And so for some of those custom installers where it's not going to be able to figure out those silent arguments, it's going to arrange everything. It's going to give us a little to-do list that just says we need to figure that out. If it's Office or SQL Server, it's going to say, you need that XML file. It doesn't generate that. And I like to say yet, but I'm pretty sure it's probably never as far as that goes. All right, so I'll move it on. So another thing that we've, as we've talked to organizations over the years, one of the other big things we've seen that they need help with is package internalization. So being able to take packages from the community repository, a lot of them we're downloading them manually, unpacking them, figuring out all the internet resources and bringing them down into the package, putting them somewhere internal, rewriting that package to do that. And so we brought about Package Internalizer to really answer that question for them so they could actually script that, push that up to like a TeamCity or a Jenkins job, and have it actually do that for them. And so they would point to the packages they care about off the community repository, and that would manage that release schedule, right? And so when a new one was available, they would have it internalized fully offline, within a matter of whenever their schedule was. And then they would push it up to a test repository, be able to test that it works appropriately before they push it over to their production repositories for greater consumption. So a lot of people ask, package builder, package internalizer, how does it work? So I'd like to introduce my friend Shia LaBeouf. All right, and so talking about some of the other things that we have available, package synchronizer. So how many people in here have installed a package and then went to programs and features and uninstalled the software and noticed the package was still there? Right, and was that a bit confusing, right? Because you would have expected that it would have uninstalled the package too. And the way that Chocolatey works with these, we call them installer packages, is it expects all commands to come through Chocolatey to change that state on the system. However, we know that's not always the case, right? And so sometimes those things get removed manually or through other things, or they get upgraded. And so we develop Package Synchronizer to see those changes happening on the system and ensure that Chocolatey is mirroring that. So it's catching that state change, being able to bring it back to Chocolatey. And in the image here, it says, hey, I'm removing the 1Password package because the 1Password software was removed, right, outside of Chocolatey. I'll go too far there. Oh. So another thing that we can do is when you have a lot of inventory reporting systems and all they're looking at is what's in programs and features, that means they're about 50 to 80% accurate, right? Because that represents only about 50 to 80% of the software that you're going to find on your system. With Chocolatey, you can actually flip a switch and it's going to be able to create managed entries for you. And so all of that stuff that you see in Chocolatey List Local Only, you'll also see in programs and features. In the image here, it's got Launchy here. Launchy has a native installer, so it doesn't need to do anything with that, so it leaves it alone. But something like Screen to GIF here. Screen to GIF is a portable package. It's just a zip. It has runtime binaries in it. It just needs to unpack. And so it will never have a native installer. And so we give that an installer, an entry, into programs and features as well. And it manages that for us. A nice side effect of this is not just the reporting, but also the fact that we can go right here to uninstall it. We don't actually have to go to a Choco command to do that. And so that's traditionally pretty helpful. There's the one I was looking for. Sync. Sync is kind of the opposite of the auto sync. Sync is a command that will let me drop Chocolatey onto a system and have it take over everything in programs and features very, very quickly. So I run that one command. It looks at everything that it's not managing, baselines it, will generate packages on the fly right there. It doesn't reach out anywhere, and it puts that system to do that. So this is probably more for an awareness. How many people in here manage desktops? Just a few, right? So this might not be a bad feature to take a look at. So if you have any non-administrative users on their desktops, we have a feature called SelfService. We try to make it a little bit easier. So you're just managing packages on the back end, and you're giving users a nice GUI, again, that Chocolatey GUI, and they're able to install and upgrade their own software based on sources you've marked as approved for self-service, right? And so in Chocolatey for Business, we have not only regular sources, but we have self-service approved sources, and we have administrator-only sources. And those administrator-only sources will never show up for non-administrators. And with that, there's a background service that's optional. It's called the Chocolatey Agent. It's what actually manages the installation. Package reducer is another thing. So as you're working with Chocolatey over time, if you take a look at that lib folder, look at the size, right? You're going to see that Chocolatey starts to use up a little bit of space. Reducer actually keeps that small for you, right? And so it automatically will clean up anything that gets unpacked out of the new package that's a zip or an installer of some sort. It's going to go to the temp folder, so if you're downloading anything at runtime from your internal locations, let's hope, it's going to clean that up as well. And then the last thing it does is it takes that new package and it pulls everything out of the new package except what's necessary. So it's actually going to make your commands run faster as it runs over that Choco list local only. And then another thing is that optimize will actually look through everything I have pre-existing, clean all that up as well. Some of the other features we have out there, shimming, which is like symlinks, but tends to work a little better. So that's you just have an executable in a package, and it's going to put it on the path for you very quickly. Install arguments and package parameters are ways that we can actually pass things into the packages that change the way the functionality works with them without having to recompile the package or have special packages that do a little bit different thing. We can do all that with our package parameters. All right, and so another thing, how many people in here have used the Chocolatey extensions? How many people in here just heard of that? How many people in here don't raise their hands? All right, fantastic. So Chocolatey extensions, if you want to bring functionality into Chocolatey, you can do that through PowerShell modules, and you would manage that as Chocolatey packages called extensions. And so it would load those up just as if they were part of Chocolatey and give you the opportunity to use those as part of the functionality for the scripts that you write. So if in your organization you have something that you're always doing, right, and it's not in the default Chocolatey stuff, you can actually make it look like it is, right? And so then you would manage that as a package, take a dependency on it, and upgrade that separately. So you don't have to add that logic to every single one of your packages. You just put it into a central location. Some of the other features inside of Chocolatey for Business. So one of the big things is some of those things that you might want to pass in as install arguments or package parameters you might want to keep secret, right? You want to keep it out of the logs. There are ways to do that in open source. In the Business Edition, we actually have what we call arguments that are sensitive and parameters that are sensitive. Those are guaranteed not to show up in any of the logs. All right, so we made that quite a bit easier. If you want to take an install directory for something and change it somewhere else, have you ever dealt with that across all those different installer types? It can be kind of difficult, especially if you've come from Linux and you're trying to figure that out and you're like, this is much more difficult than it should be. We have what we call the ubiquitous install directory. So we can actually pass that one flag in. Chocolatey will figure out how to pass it properly to that underlying native installer. I'm going to flip over here. All right. Oh, maybe not. We'll put this slide deck up later so you can read through all the rest of this. I spent too much time on it. So on our roadmap, some of the things that we're doing, right? So one of those things is bringing about a central management web UI where you can actually go in and have all of these reports that we were talking about aggregate to one location. So you get a nice view of the state of software inside of your organization. That's our web UI. The web UI will also have a console with it, and so that will allow you to ask questions of your environment, maybe set up deployments, scheduled deployments, phase deployments, all that fun stuff you would expect with that. And that'll be through that. And Choco Deploy is really that command line side of it where you're able to deploy out to many machines and be able to do that. Those two features add remote management to Chocolatey itself. What you do now, a lot of times when you're using Chocolatey, is use something else to direct it. Something like Puppet, Chef, all of those things we were mentioning earlier. Does anybody in here use package management, OneGet? How are you finding it? It works? For PowerShell, right? Does it work with Chocolatey very well? Be careful there. What's funny about the name, it's called package management. It does not manage any packages whatsoever. Only manages other package managers. And so Chocolatey has a prototype one that was written by Microsoft a while back. And again, it is very much a prototype, so it's hard to recommend use for that. We've been working with the community to work on an official one. Microsoft also worked with us on one called Chocolatey Get, which is a great bridge. If you do need to use package management, I would suggest using that one. So there's that. Some of the package enhancements that we're going to be putting into Chocolatey make it work quite a bit better as far as that new spec, some of the other things in there. things that you expect when you see like cross-platform and some of those other things like apt and those things. But so in the package enhancements, one of the big ones is, well, GPG signing or that and or authentic code signing. So it's probably going to be one or both, or probably both by the time we're done. And so you'll be able to do that. We're going to do it in a compatible way. For anybody following NuGet, you know they're adding that to NuGet itself. So we'll definitely support it once NuGet has it. Other package enhancements that are going in, when you need specific platform-specific dependencies. And so I'm deploying to Windows Server 2012, and on Server 2012, I actually need these patches installed. So I need to make sure these are here. But when I'm going to 2016, I don't need them, right? And so those kinds of dependencies and stuff we'll be adding into Chocolatey. So that's a pretty big one that's coming. It will be compatible to go up onto NuGet server types that don't necessarily know about Chocolatey because they will just handle that. But when it comes to using NuGet to author any of that, that'll be pretty much impossible. We won't know about it at all. So I'm not going to say much about this, but just read that. Other platforms, think about what I have right here. So deferred installer, package grid, those are pretty big ones. And so the concept of Windows Update has moved more towards looking at peers to pull all those binary stuff in. Chocolatey will look to do the same. It'll be an optional thing that you can add in. Deferred installer will come in two different ways. And so as we're looking to support more of that desktop model of deployment, one of the big things there is toast notifications, those little toast pop-ups. We'll be supporting that. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of them either, but a lot of our customers are. So we'll be adding that. And with that, also the concept of, when you're trying to deploy Microsoft Word to an environment or something that's updating Office and somebody's using Microsoft Word, they don't really like it when it just shuts down. Apparently, I don't know why. So we're going to have a little pop-up that will give them the opportunity to say, save my work, go ahead and continue, right? When we see that kind of stuff, we're going to do that automatically. So you don't actually have to specify. It just knows, when I'm bringing in Office, that actually is going to be trying to upgrade Word, right? And so you'll get options there. You can actually have them defer it and also cancel it if you want to give them that option as well. Pack validation. So how many people in here deploy out to the community repository? You, Manfred? Yeah, a couple people, right? One of the nice things that you see there is when you push up, there's this thing called Package Validator, and it actually checks the quality of the package for you. There's also a verifier as well, but that checking that quality, it runs really, really fast. It's something that we can actually build right into Chocolatey, so we're going to pull that back, and that's what that pack validation is. And so that'll help you build up a quality. You'll be able to set different levels, and so for the community repository, we actually have that pretty strict, but for organizations, you may want to reduce that some. Oh, demo. The best part. This is visible. Make it just a bit bigger here. Better now? All right, so when I'm running Choco new to create something like Adobe Reader here. And so when I run that, what it's going to do when I'm using that default community template, it's going to generate quite a few files out for me, and I can actually take a look at these. What I'm going to see is I'm going to see a to-do list right off in a Readme. I'm also going to see a couple extra files in here, and so if we just pop these into Notepad+ here, take a little bit of a closer look at them, make this just a tiny bit bigger. Is that good? Looks good? Yeah, okay. One of the big things you're going to see is some of the things that when we're talking to folks, we see that there's a lot of trying to figure out how I'm going to use this package. Am I pushing it to the community repository? Am I using it internally? You actually will build your package differently based on that information. And so we're giving people a decision matrix in that first step. And we're saying when you go about it this way, these are the steps you're going to take. If you go about it a different way, these are the steps you're going to take. And so then we're trying to introduce people to the fact that it's not just about installers. And so if you're determining that different type of package that you're going to set up, you can do that here. And so then some more stuff that we're actually going to tell you about. I will tell you at the very bottom of this, there's a nice link to both a Vagrant/Hyper-V image that you can go and you can actually test your Chocolatey stuff without having to mess up your machine, which is handy. We also have a link to a workshop, and so that workshop will teach you all about more than I can teach you in an hour. We actually did this workshop yesterday, but you can go through that. You don't have to necessarily be in person for it. So it's a nice walkthrough at your own pace kind of thing. Lots of different exercises out there. And we say that anybody that can get through that, goes through all the way through, that's pretty much a Chocolatey expert at that point. So there's the Readme. The Readme is very helpful maybe the first few times, pointing you off to documentation that we have. And I will tell you, we have really good documentation if you need a reference manual. If you're trying to learn how to use Chocolatey, it may not be the best documentation in the world, because if you don't know what you're looking for, it's really hard to search for it. We are working on that, so we are adding more conceptual docs, a little bit more of the walkthroughs and stuff, and you'll be seeing that as well. Another thing you see in here in the Readme, we had tell you about all the different environment variables that you can actually use in your packages, and so if you're trying to switch features or stuff based on environment, knowing which version of Chocolatey you're bringing in, all that information we're going to provide to you so you can use that. So in the new spec, right, so if you've seen the traditional NuGet new spec here, you see that we interweave a lot of documentation here. And this is really to kind of set you on the right path and get you set, get you started there. And so you'll see package-specific documentation. We'll give you that software-specific section. One of the best things about package management, or anything when you look to use something for software management, really comes down to dependency management. So if you could imagine doing this in something that's not a package manager, where you would say, hey, I need to have at least Java version 6, but less than version 8. Imagine trying to build that kind of complexity into other things. So here's just one line, right? And so if Java has dependencies, it's going to go right up that chain. It's going to make sure everything comes in the right order, going to handle all that conflict resolution for you. And that's kind of a really big reason for looking at package management. So moving to the next thing, we have a before modify. So before upgrade, before uninstall, you have the opportunity to shut down processes and services. This comes from the package that's already installed, not the one that we're installing. Then we have, I'll skip that for a second, license and verification. Those are really only related to the community repository. This default template is very much a generalist approach, so it's about removing out the things you don't need. We have an uninstall script here, and again, that auto uninstaller, 9 times out of 10, you probably don't need it, but in case you want to be explicit, you have the opportunity to add that here. And so this, I would just say, what's the name in programs and features and the display name, and then what type of installer or uninstaller is it. And if it's MSI, we're done. We don't have anything additional that we need to do there. If it isn't, we're going to have to figure out what those silent arguments are. And it kind of does the rest. There's a nice link to some of the other functions that we can add in here, but do keep in mind this is just PowerShell, right? So we can do pretty much anything we want here. Pretty handy, right? It's uninstalled. All right, so inside of the install script, we're going to give you some information here, but really when you're building your own packages internally, we're going to want you to embed those binaries right into the package, because that's how you get the most reliable use of Chocolatey. You know, when you have the package, you have everything you need to get that thing installed. And so you'll drop those binaries right into the folder, change the name around, right? Let it know what the name is, and then if it goes over a gigabyte, right, the size of the package, or whatever is good for you, whatever threshold, that might be 500 megabyte, you might pull that out, put it on a share location, or you may prefer to put it onto a binary repository or something that's internal that you can download from at runtime. And so just keeping it all from reaching out to the internet. And you go about setting all of that up, and if you are using the embedded files, use install Chocolatey install package as opposed to the named install Chocolatey package, right? That's not confusing at all for anybody. But install Chocolatey install package actually uses the files where they are. It doesn't try to copy them down or pull them from some remote location to a temp folder like install Chocolatey package does. That gets really confusing if you're working with a share location and all the other files that are surrounding that don't get copied with it and you're using the wrong function there. All right, so let's take a look at what we got here. So we have some installers, and we have a script here that's going to look over those and actually kick this off so we can see it go as we talk about it. And it's going to create some packages for us. So we're just saying, hey, look over the files that are in this installer archive, and for each one of them, we find we're going to call Choco new. Instead of giving it a name, we're just going to point it directly to that installer file. We're going to say, hey, Chocolatey, you're pretty smart. You figure it out. And then it's going to create packages for us. And so it's just doing that over here. And as you can see, it's very fast. I'm actually going to cut it here in a second because it's going to try to do the internet. Actually, the internet's not too bad. So maybe we'll let that keep going. And you could also say, hey, I want to use those files for the detection and figuring it out, but I don't want to embed them. That's where the use original location comes in. And then I can also point it to a URL and be able to do that as well. And so it goes without saying, but you see localhost and admin share here. Please don't do that. That's what we have for our demo environment, but it's not very scalable. And so it goes through and it's creating these packages for us. And we can take a look at this particular one. This is an MSI. You know, MSIs, traditionally, they're not very difficult to automate. I think that's why people love them, right? The arguments are always pretty much the same. You know, -q and no restart, maybe a log file. The thing about MSIs, though, is a lot of times they'll have MSI properties. One of the nice things that Package Builder will do for you, will actually extract them all out and drop them into a comment. And so all you would need to do is bring down the item that you might need, go ahead and copy it, bring it up into the install arguments, and paste it there, give it whatever setting you want. Now, the silent arguments, a lot of people may know this, may not know this, but those are the default silent arguments. I can actually change those at runtime. So I can append to them just with the install arguments function. There's another switch that's override arguments that will allow me to completely replace these. And so I can actually change the functionality of this without doing anything there to the package itself. So just going with it the way it is. There's also package parameters, and we don't have time to go through the walkthrough, but I will show you where it is so you'll be able to see that. Chocolatey.org. Packages, no, docs. And if you just come over here to the left menu, scroll all the way down pretty much to parse package parameters. And so there's a nice walkthrough here. And this is actually kind of the way we're going to start formatting more of our documentation. So you get a nice walkthrough that shows you all the nice things you can do. So read host in Chocolatey is not blocking. It is blocking in regular PowerShell. It's not blocking in Chocolaty's PowerShell host. Prompt for choice, none of that. So you'll be able to prompt the user, and after 30 seconds, if it doesn't get an answer, it times out and moves on. And that's really nice because if you're trying to deploy out to an environment that's completely headless, you want to be able to still use that package in maybe desktop settings. You still get that same package for use in both areas. So another one that we did here, just to show you that executable installers, it's pretty good at determining those too. We have this install script. It's figured out that that's a no setup. So what we're going to get out of that, we're actually going to go ahead and install that. So now we're going to do choco install, one password. We are going to say -y, so that's the auto confirm, and -s in the dot just tells us we're going to install it out of this local directory. So while it's running there, let's sit here and wait for it. And there, it got installed. You can see there, it showed us where it was installed, told us it knows how to auto uninstall it as well. Now, well, that's a pretty nice thing, right? So we built that package in about 5 seconds, got it deployed pretty quickly as well. But you know, maybe that's not really showing some of that power. So imagine there's a critical security issue, right? And we actually need to upgrade one password to something newer. So we go download that new version, and what do? We create that software deployment to figure it out. With Chocolatey, all we need to do is just right-click on it, and then create that Chocolatey package. And then we're done with that step, right? And that's the part that takes the longest. Now we just have to push it up to wherever that repository is and set up everything to get it upgraded. And so here, you know, since everything is local, we're just missing that extra step, but you can imagine it's just choco push, and then being able to direct that out through your environment. All right, and so very quick way of getting things installed and upgraded. All right, so it's thinking about it, and it's done. I did mention that another thing that we have is the ability to download things, right, and internalize them. So if we were to say, hey, I want to bring in Notepad++, I'll do internalize. You did see me hit tab, and it did autocomplete. So Chocolatey does have a PowerShell tab completion that you can set up. I say go into the docs and the troubleshooting. I'll show you how to set that up in case it's not set up on your machine already. And that was actually extremely fast there. So it's hitting the CDN. Everybody must not be on internet right now. And so what's happening is it pulls down that, it pulls down all of its dependencies, and it internalizes all of them. And so as we go in here, this particular package is a non-redistributable, right? And so it's bringing in those files, it's rewriting that install script so that it's using everything locally. So that's where it's rewritten this URL. And it's noticed that we were using splatting here, so it actually brought this in a different way. If it wasn't using splatting, it would just add this argument to the end. What that's doing is it's making install Chocolatey package behave more like install Chocolatey install package, so we can get that taken care of. So there's a ton of more things that we have out there, but we do want to leave a few minutes for questions. So I want to show you one more thing, and then we'll dive right into questions. So let's do this. So if we take a look at everything that we have installed locally, we'll go ahead and include programs there so we get a nice view. We see that we're managing quite a few packages here with Chocolatey. We have a couple things we're not managing with Chocolatey yet, so we would not call that because that's not a command. We call ChocoSync. And what it's going to do is going to take a look at this stuff that it's not managing. It's actually going to bring that under Chocolatey management, right? And so now I can actually take this stuff and upgrade it. Now, I'll mention earlier when we ran the create packages and it was looking through everything around that package builder, that usually, again, that's about 70% of the time it's going to be able to, or 70% of the installers out there is going to be able to fully automate. Of course, in our demo environment, it's 100%, right? Makes sense. But you get a kind of a view when you run that sync in what you would see if it did not have that information, like all the information it was able to do that with. The Puppet agent, it did. It was a local MSI. It was able to pull that MSI and build a full package. Right, and so we have everything we need for that one. But if it's not, if it's like Bitbuys SSH installer, I do get that to-do list. And that to-do list really is just saying, I pulled this out of programs and features, but I didn't have the installers, so you need to go get those. Drop those into this folder here. And once you've done that, open up this and just tell me the name of those files, right? And so then you're able to do that. Now the interesting thing is, I did already have that package on one of my sources, and so if I ran outdated, I would see that that particular one I just added, which was Bitbuys SSH Server, is 2 major versions out of date, right? So I just have an awareness that I need to go fix this, right? Because 2 major versions on an SSH server is probably bad. All right, so the next thing I would probably do is go ahead and Choco upgrade to take care of that. We're not going to do that because we don't have time. I want to get to questions. So I'll jump back over here really quick, and we'll finish this out. So this is you, right? And this is you on Chocolatey. You know where this is going. Any questions?
Can remote installation be performed without any configuration management product? So, for example, just purely over WinRM?
Yes.
And are there any double hop issues as a result of doing that?
There are. So you need the CRED SSP, otherwise you'll run into that.
Thank you.
There's a way of doing security with the WinRM that actually can alleviate a lot of that, but yeah, you still have to deal with it.
But the preferred way is with CRED. The preferred method is with CRED SSP.
Whatever works best in your environment. I can't make the security recommendation for you. So.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Any more questions?
So if I don't want, what do I gain using a package, an Artifactory server, compared to just leaving the Choco files on a shared file server or a NAS? Because my NAS is going to scale better for 1,000 desktops sitting at once compared to
that is
my
true.
Artifactory VM.
See if I can pull this up. This is the one I can go to. Show you what they get there. So I can't type chocolate either, so don't feel bad. So this particular page will actually tell you all of the benefits and issues that you might see. And so one of those is package version immutability. When you're using a DFS share, you got to be really careful that you don't overwrite that package version, because if you have version 1 out somewhere and it's broken, and everybody that has version 1, you want it to be that exact same version. And so they're all broken so that you know when you pass 1.0.1, it's a different one. And so you have to manage that when you are using local share. That's the biggest disadvantage. You just have to be really careful that you don't accidentally override a version. Right? So other than that, that's the thing. Those tools that are out there, all those other things, they're already going to guarantee that for you, so you don't even need to manage that. Right? They may or may not scale very well. A lot of them have HA and replication, and that's why we recommend using those. And so because they can go to the co-located, geographically dispersed places, right? And so you could set up a repository in each one of them. You would push to one, and it would replicate across to the others. So, but yeah, DFS is much cheaper.
Any more questions?
You've been talking about a couple of new features for Choco for Business, especially the central web management UI. And I wanted to ask when this is due to.
The question is, when is it due? The Central Management Console was due like back in June-ish, but you know how software works. Never on time. But we want to make sure it's right, and so we've been working on it, and it's starting to get closer. We still don't really have a UI that we want to share yet because it's ugly, but you know, we're getting there. So we're probably looking to start some of the beta action, and so anybody that's interested in getting on the beta, we're going to start pushing out some of that in preview release. Hopefully, it'll be this year. Hopefully, I don't want to give a date because we keep missing it. But summer vacations, all that stuff was fantastic. So we're looking probably October. We're hoping October. So there's another conference coming up that we're going to. We want to have something to show when we get there.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that brings us to the end of the session.
A couple minutes
left. Are there any?
Probably good for 2 questions.
How is the business version charged for? Is it per desktop, per server, per admin, per site?
So the question was, how is it the pricing model for the business side? And it's actually per wherever you have Chocolatey, every single one of those locations, it gets counted. So
Just per site model.
we like to keep the price cheap, but with that, it kind of works per node. Yeah.
Per node, per desktop, per server? Or?
So if you have a desktop and you have a VM, and both of them have Chocolatey on it, that's 2.
Right. Okay,
So we always say per machine, per place that you have Chocolatey, just to make that easier to understand for folks. Because otherwise you could have a big NAS server and to have a whole bunch of VMs on it. They all count.
Okay.
Any more questions?
That's it. Thanks.